there's an article from the Atlantic that says that dating apps are falling back to earth, and effectively saying that they're getting less usage than they used to. What do you think?
My first question is why. You and I are married. I haven't when Tinder and all that stuff really started hitting. This is 2010. I think that's like right around the time I met my wife. Um, and so I wasn't really. I used when I was on the dating sites. They weren't as accepted back then. Like you were almost kind of embarrassed to say that you met on this dating site. Now, this is early 2000s or whatever. And then after Tinder and things like that, it's just a normal thing. People, it's just a normal way of meeting people. Um, my question is why? I don't really have an opinion, good or bad towards it falling, but you would think that if anything else, it would just increase with the advent of technology and people. Like if you could just sit at home and not have to, like, you have the bar experience but at home, like especially as a guy where there's no real risk. Like you go to a bar. I know for me back in the day to walk up to a woman in a bar, that would take a lot of guts from me back in the day. Whereas now, if I could just sit home on my couch and just swipe and send out messages, there's low risk. And so I would think that that behavior would actually increase and there would be more competition in the app space. So while it may not be as like just, it might not have the craze that Tinder and whatever the other apps had at one point, I still think that that market would grow as time goes on.
Well, it's been growing for a long time. You're right. There used to be a negative stigma about it. You would never want to admit to anything. I've heard of couples talking amongst themselves like what that met on an app. They say, where are we going to tell others that we met?
Yep.
Because it's not going to be the app. It has to be some other story, and they have to get it all together. And naturally, eventually, the truth comes out, and the magic is lost because it was on a dating app. And to that point, I think that there is a magic that is missing on these dating apps, which is why, for all the reasons that you mentioned, is why dating apps just blew up like crazy. The ease, the convenience, the options. You literally have thousands and thousands of options at any given moment. And I want to talk about that too, but I think people are getting tired of that and they're losing the magic of meeting somebody in person. Once you schedule a date on an app, you're kind of already committed to them, even if in person you don't have that connection. And then eventually, and maybe there's something there and you just keep pushing it through. And even if you get married, and I know some successful, some unsuccessful marriages that met on an app, I don't know. I think the magic is missing.
Bro, my ex girlfriend, I only had like really two girlfriends, like two real girlfriends post high school. But my first one, she met her husband on Craigslist. I was like, what the hell? Like Craigslist was like the original Tinder in my opinion. Like you were just kind of going there to try to hook up, probably pay somebody or something like that to hook up. I don't even know why I'm telling this story, but I think to your point, the magic being lost. Yeah, the magic has been lost because it's probably been normalized. Um, but still, bro, I think that given the everyday, like this, at least for the dude, when we look at men and why we get so terrified to go walk up to a woman and why we get terrified for rejection, there's a lot of reasons behind it. But I think at a primal level, if you were in a little tribe, right? Like whether your ancestors are in Africa or they were in Europe or whatever it is, back in the day, if you were in a little tribe and you got rejected from their tribe, there was a real risk of death. If you got rejected from the women, there's a real risk of you not being able to procreate and have your lineage continue, right? So that is in us today, even though the situation has still changed. And so while the appeal for the app, and it's not as exciting as it once was, I still think for dudes it's excellent because it removes that perceived risk with rejection, right? Subconscious or conscious risk.
Yeah, but here's the thing: the truth, I think, is a lot grimmer for the dudes than it's made to sound. So I've read these statistics before. Is that most men rate women at an average of like a 6.5, which is above average. Most men think most women are above average, which is statistically impossible because like the averages are the average, but most
Right.
men rate them higher. Most women, on the other hand, rate most men as below average. And it's skewed way worse than the men do positively to the women. Like, most women find most men kind of abhorrent and disgusting, at least in their ratings.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening is that 90% or more of the matches end up going to 10% of the guys. And so what ends up happening because of these apps and the internet is that for the top tier of, let's say, looking guys, they have a much bigger pool of women to choose from and who are even willing to share a man. And everyone in the bottom 90% actually get no matches. They get nothing, whereas they used to get something because there's only so much that the top tier could take. So it's actually getting worse in terms of rejection, in my opinion. So yes, you don't have to go and get rejected in person, but you're still getting rejected at a crazy rate online.
That is an interesting point. And um, a I don't think that the percentage that's an interesting point, and I don't think that the percentages will swing as far that sounds about right, right? 10%, right, of the men probably getting 90% of the women. But with and that works for the guy who looks good. And the guy who looks good, I think it becomes a loop because he looks good, so it's easier for him to talk to women, and he kind of learns women, and it just becomes easier for those guys, those naturals. Then there's a guy like me. I don't consider myself. I would not be in that 10%. I didn't just have women sending me messages, right? I don't think I'm not just the most handsome dude ever. But what I learned was that attraction can be created. So you're right. Most women think guys don't look good, but the difference is if a guy thinks a woman doesn't look good or she's not attractive, her personality can only help so much, and who she is can. It does help, right? Don't get me wrong. Like it does help, but it can only help so much if you're really not that attractive as a female. As a male, you may not be that attractive, but there's two things: either a lover or a provider. So if you're a lover, the guy who's not, he might not be that attractive, but he might be a bad boy. He might be funny. He might be somebody who picks on her, who doesn't fall for her beauty, who doesn't really, he's just super confident, whatever. He makes himself attractive. Or you could be somebody who's super rich. You might not be that attractive as a person, a dude, whatever, but you're super rich. You, a man, can create attraction. And if you are motivated enough and you get on these apps, you can learn how to create attraction. So you might not look, and I'm going somewhere with this point, but you might not be that 10% or in that 10% of good looking people. But if you could write copy, if you could do a headline that gets her attention, if you can make her laugh, you can make her feel something, then your opportunity increases. And so I don't think that the percentage will swing that much. I think a small percentage of the men will still date a bigger percentage of the women, but it doesn't mean it can't. And I think that it won't swing that much because most men, they're sitting at home and they're lazy and they're just swiping and they're just going to take whatever they can get. But if they just put a little more effort towards it, learned how to talk to women, learn how to kind of hack these things and how to get a woman's attention, then those percentages could change if they did that.
That's true. That there's some other guys that I know that this was at this point it was almost 10 years ago that literally hacked the whole texting and what you say, and there's probably courses that came out after this.
Oh yeah.
But so it could be like literally hacked. So it's not you. So when you get into that relationship, it wasn't you. So I don't know. I just think the magic can be lost. So what I would be curious about is what are the successes, or what the percentage of success of a relationship of meeting in person versus online. And in person can have different categories, like you met at a bar, or you met through a friend referral, or you met at a quality event such as a church or a community event or some kind, or mutual friend's birthday party. That's already pre-qualified in that respect. So, and even what are they called, arranged marriages. I would like to see all the stats of what leads to the more successful relationships, because if online is leading to more relationships that are successful on whatever terms the people deem, it's not like you even have to say it's only successful if XYZ. It's like, do you have a successful relationship? And people can determine for themselves. So without that information, I don't know. I only have anecdotal information, but like, but men are supposed to be brave, right? And they're supposed to go out on a limb and do something that they're scared of doing. And if we keep taking away opportunities to do that, we're losing our strong men, which we are, right?
You said something that stood out to me. One more point is that you're right. Like you could take that course and learn all the things to say and kind of get that whole copywriting thing down, which is a skill. Like learning all that is a skill that you could develop. But then you eventually do have to talk to her and you have to meet her. And if this person you presented via, writing is not congruent with who she talks to or who she meets, then it's all for nothing. And so it's like it's like if you lied on the application, you lie on, hey, I'm a doctor, I can do surgery. Then it comes time to do it, and you're screwed. You have to be consistent with what you are doing there, which is an interesting point. Anyways,
Yeah. Well, just to, I guess, wrap on this one is that in terms of growth of dating apps, I agree with you in the disagreement of the article that they're fading. Maybe it's a temporary plateau, but I expect more and more. Now, some of these market caps that I just looked up, like Match Group, which owns Match.com, Twitter, I mean, Tinder, they're worth almost $10 billion. Bumble's worth two. Grindr's third at two as well. Like, these apps are valuable.